A suspected Indiana serial killer has authorities in multiple states retracing his steps and looking into cold cases spanning the last 20 years. Darren Dion Van of Gary has appeared in a Crown Point courtroom this week facing charges of robbery and murder. Van was arrested by Hammond police last week after the body of a young woman was found at the Motel 6 just off 8094 in Hammond. The 43-year-old Van initially cooperated with authorities and confessed to 6 other area murders. Based on information he provided, police discovered more bodies in various stages of decomposition in abandoned houses in Gary. So far, authorities have identified Van's victims as 19-year-old Africa Hardy of Gary, 35-year-old Aneth Jones of Maryville, 28-year-old Tiara Beatty of Gary, and 36-year-old Christine Williams of Gary. Gary Mayor Karen Freeman Wilson says that it's easy to get caught up trying to understand the killer's motives, but no one should forget his victims.
At the center of this, in the beginning, in the end, and in the middle, is the fact that 7 women, 6 of them who have been found in Gary, have lost their lives. The families of Aneth Jones, the family of Christina Miller, the family of Tiara Beatty are in mourning.
The Gary Police Department is using cadaver dogs to sweep abandoned buildings throughout the city in order to make sure they are completely empty and mark them for demolition. The Lake County Coroner's Office is asking the public's help in order to identify bodies found as a result of the Darren Van multiple murder investigation. Coroner Marilee Fry is specifically seeking information about 2 Jane Does. One was found October 19th in the 400 block of 43rd Ave in Gary. She was wearing a silver-colored ring with a heart shape on top of the ring and another silver ring with scalloped engravings. She was also wearing a silver-colored linked bracelet engraved with Best Aunt. The second female was found in the 4300 block of Massachusetts in Gary. She was wearing Rue 21 blue jeans, size 3-4, and white Nike gym shoes. Jane Doe number 2 was approximately 5 feet tall.
It appears that the public is working very well with us, and we hope to continue to have that relationship. The phone calls are coming in. I believe that with the help of the media, that the public is aware of the situation here in Lake County. That's helpful. The calls come in, we will address each one very thoroughly. Our hope is that we have 100% identity.
Anyone with information that could help identify either Jane Doe should call the Lake County Coroner's Office at 219-755-3265. The tragic news of multiple murders in the region can affect more than just family members. Trauma experts say major crime incidents can put a community under the microscope. Indiana University Northwest Director of Counseling Services Barbara Dahl, an expert in grief counseling, says it's not unusual for some residents to be dealing with sadness and encourages open discussion about their concerns.
Even if you don't know the people, it's still in your community. The truth is you are connected to it. It's part of that corporate feeling of sadness or loss, hope that you might have had in, the community. Exposure sometimes is not always negative. It can create that dialogue that people can have with one another.
Dahl says cleaning up around neighborhoods, attending a vigil, or sending a card to victims' family are all ways residents can express their sympathy. At the same time that Gary is actively searching hundreds of abandoned houses, the city is touting the progress it has made fighting urban blight and vowing to take its efforts further by accepting the Night Cities Challenge. The Legacy Foundation of Northwest Indiana was at Purdue Calumet this week to educate the public about the Night Cities Challenge and encourage community involvement. The privately held Knight Foundation wants to invest millions of dollars over the next 3 years in the best big ideas to help revitalize struggling cities. The Legacy Foundation is asking community members to submit proposals to nightcity.org by November 14th for projects that they believe will attract talented people to Gary, expand economic opportunities in the city, and create a culture of civic engagement. The Legacy Foundation is also giving tips for writing proposals and will be holding additional public meetings in Gary on October 28th, 29th, and 31st. For more information, go to legacyfdn.org. The last honor flight of the year is due to take off next week, and the Northwest Indiana Veterans Action Council and Honor Flight Chicago are looking to you for help. Honor Flight Chicago is a nonprofit organization dedicated to honoring World War II veterans with an all-expense-paid trip to Washington, D.C. to visit the World War II Memorial. The organization says that any World War II veteran is eligible to take an honor flight, but there may be those out there who aren't aware that Honor Flight is waiting to give them a free ride.
About 120 World War II veterans that have joined us, and it's just our way of reaching out. Some of them have flown with the Honor Flight program and some have not, so it's our way of, again, continuing to thank our World War II veterans, but also to hopefully locate another hero.
The last Honor Flight of the year will take off from Chicago's Midway Airport on October 29th. The city of Gary has made a big push this year to demolish abandoned properties throughout the city. Despite that, Gary has only managed to scratch the surface. There's new urgency now to clear out some of the worst of Gary's urban blight after the discovery of bodies hidden inside derelict houses. Lakeshore's Hillary Powell has more.
The latest parcel survey numbers released by the Gary Redevelopment Department this week show the city has as many as 8,000 vacant and abandoned properties. The discovery of alleged murder victims in some of those homes is a gruesome reminder of a legacy of urban decay Lakeshore Report has been tracking all year. The tactic to curb crime by fighting blight. Boarded up, broken, standing as a reminder of past steel industry boom. 8,000 blighted buildings within Gary city limits, according to a new report from the city and the University of Chicago.
We recognize that there are a lot of potentially dangerous things that could happen with vacant buildings.
Because Darren Dion Van, the man charged Monday with 1 count of murder, told police he hid the bodies of 6 Gary women he killed in 5 blighted homes. Entities that are often afterthoughts are now at the forefront of strategy for City Hall.
It's certainly a grave concern that he concealed his crimes through the use of abandoned homes in the city of Gary, although that does underscore that our approach is consistent and it's the right thing to do, meaning that our prioritizing the abandoned structures that are in the city is in fact correct.
Emmanuel Ferguson, a resident who lives on the 1800 block of East 19th Street, where the body of 28-year-old Tierra Beatty was found, says blight makes his block dangerous.
They found the body right here, it's a school, like not even 2 blocks, where little children play, so it's just like kind of disturbing.
On this day, more than 3 groups of school children passed by the home and another vacant property while we were filming.
Kids just walk through riding their bikes, and to know, we have corpse, in this house. We want to make sure, if we let our kids step outside, that they're going to be safe.
Mayor Karen Freeman Wilson says her administration's been attacking tattered properties all year. Just last month, she watched alongside Indiana Lieutenant Governor Sue Ellspermann as demolition began in the city with new federal funding. But the city's Director of Development, Joseph Van Dyke, says his department can't afford to demolish all eligible properties.
There are just never enough resources. It would be our dream to be able to knock down every vacant property, to secure every home that needs to be boarded up temporarily. But until there's a lot more resources, we work with what we have.
He says Gary was recently awarded the largest demolition allocation in the state, $6.6 million from the United States Department of Treasury's Hardest Hit Fund. But with overgrowth like this and blighted buildings like this dotting the streets, residents say their plan just isn't enough.
I actually think it's not a block in Gary that doesn't have a vacant property.
Van Dyke describes his job as one where he's always trying to find new funding.
8,000 properties, that's $80 million. So that's a big price tag for a city like Gary.
Officials say the cleanup is continuous. A board-up crew has been clearing homes, but the process is complaint-based.
Typically, our board-up is pretty quick. Right now we have 0 outstanding 311 board-up complaints. I think 280 homes have been boarded up already this year.
If they could get rid of these buildings, I think a lot of people feel a lot more safe.
Northwest Indiana's riverboat casinos have been dealing with declining revenues, but some state legislators want to turn that around. Lakeshore Steve Walsh has more.
Next week, a committee of state lawmakers is expected to recommend changes to Indiana's casino industry. Faced with growing competition over the past 2 years, the state has seen a steady decline in revenue from its 10 casinos, including the 5 licenses in northwest Indiana. To talk about what they might recommend, we have Tom Dermody, who is the Republican from LaPorte, who chairs the Summer Study Committee. Tom, welcome to the show.
Steve, great to be here.
So right now, is there any, 2 years of revenue declines here among Indiana's casinos, is there any light at the end of the tunnel in your mind?
Well, I believe so. I think the Summer Study Committee has really taken an open look to say, okay, whether you like gaming, whether you don't, we do need it as a resource. We like the revenue dollars that come locally, and it can't continue to be ignored.
Can't continue to be ignored, but is there any sort of consensus among, there are 10 different licenses out there. I don't really see a lot of consensus coming from, let's say, Hammond and Gary, East Chicago, and Michigan City.
Nor will we ever have that. I think every facility's looking for what's best for themselves, but I think they have participated. I've included them in all the discussions, and I think we will be able to, in the end, come up with some recommendations that hopefully will be more than a Band-Aid that some facilities may not like and others will, but we're looking at it from the 20,000-foot level to say, hey, we're not trying to help every facility, but try to do what's best for the industry.
So what is the, there you go. So bottom line, what are you looking for? Are you looking for trying to save jobs, or are you trying to shore up the amount of money that the state of Indiana gets from casinos? What's the goal here? Well,
I think it is to make the industry, what we've been targeted with is to make the industry more competitive. And as we look at that, we've had the deep discussion about land-based. We've had discussion about live dealers at the racinos. We've had the admission tax and the free play deduction. And those 4 items, especially the land-based and the racino live dealers, is a situation where that's going to help certain people and help the industry, but also hurt individual locations and make it more difficult on them.
The riverboats that have all these live games right now, they don't want to see competition from horse tracks.
Correct. But, we've already had competition, and I think it's, when you go to the racinos and see, is this a computer dealer versus a live dealer, and we can create those jobs and develop the economy in those areas and for the state, I think it's silly to not consider that.
You mentioned the admissions tax. A lot of local communities up here, they use that tax. A lot of roads get paved around here. Casinos want to get rid of that tax or somehow change it. It's a vestige from like the early days of casinos when they actually you got on a boat and it went out into Lake Michigan and came back. Now people are getting on and off the boat, pretty consistently.
Well, and again, remember, the gaming facilities themselves were the ones that chose to say, hey, we don't want to charge the admission tax anymore. And so I've heard from many local leadership, from councils and so forth, that say, hey, it's silly to make them do the admission tax, but don't hurt us. And so that's a nice position to be in. But the state, if revenues are going to continue to decline, I don't think can backfill all those dollars locally statewide.
One thing that's been big up here is the notion of whether or not we'll see land-based gaming in Gary. And I know Majestic Star, their CEO testified before your committee saying that we're not trying to locate along the Bourne End or I-65 anymore. We just want to locate, on land right next to where we are in Buffington Harbor. Does that seem like that's something that's going to be possible this time around?
Well, it's been great discussion, and from my perspective, the Majestic Star, to see them blocking the harbor, blocking economic development, I'm not sure if it makes much sense versus just allowing them to move onto their footprint to freeing up that area, freeing up the harbor for what everybody wants us to do, and that's help make an environment to create jobs.
All right. Tom Dermody, Republican from LaPorte, chairman of the Summer Study Committee, which is going to meet next Thursday to talk about this very issue and try to come to some sort of consensus. Thank you so much for being on.
Steve, great to be here. I'm sure we'll talk soon after next Thursday.
Much of public housing in the United States is located in high poverty areas. It's been shown that children living in these mostly inner city neighborhoods are at risk for experiencing emotional difficulties. A recent study examined the long-term emotional consequences of moving from public housing in high poverty areas to better neighborhoods during childhood. Catherine Dolph explains in this week's JAMA report.
Public housing in the United States costs about $36 billion a year. Low-income families rely on this housing.
If we were to move some of these families to better neighborhoods, could we have more positive effects on income, education, health, well-being. We don't really know.
That's why the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development funded an experiment. They offered some public housing families who volunteered financial help to move into better neighborhoods.
The restriction was that the neighborhood had to be substantially better than their current neighborhood. We required them to move to a neighborhood where no more than 10% were living in poverty.
They also offered other families financial help to move into whatever neighborhood they wanted to live in.
We wanted to be able to compare the effects of just moving from the effects of moving to a better place.
Dr. Ronald Kessler from Harvard Medical School and co-authors evaluated the effect of the move on the children's mood and anxiety. They were interviewed 10 to 15 years after they moved.
Girls who lived in households that were offered the opportunity to move to a better neighborhood turned out to have lower rates of depression, lower rates of conduct disorder than the girls who lived in families that weren't made that offer.
The study appears in JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association.
Boys ended up having higher rates of depression, higher rates of conduct disorder or juvenile delinquency, and higher rates of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Researchers say better understanding of the differences in risk factors between boys and girls is needed to guide future public housing policy changes.
The real question is, how can we in the future use these results to try to maintain that positive effect for girls, whereas minimizing the negative effects or maybe even reversing it in a way that would maximize benefits for not only girls but also for boys.
Catherine Dolph, The JAMA Report.
If your favorite neighborhood is pretty much run by a fragrant ogre with a donkey sidekick, you might be a Shrek fan. If that's the case, John Kane has some great news for you in this week's Eye on the Arts.
Joining me for this edition of Eye on the Arts is Tricia Hales, music director for the Marion Theater Company's production. You've been the music director for so many theater companies, but currently with the Marion Theater Guild and production of Shrek.
Yes.
Shrek the musical.
Yes.
Which I have never seen.
Well, if you've seen the movie, which I guess you haven't seen that either. It's a wonderful family show about an ogre who is basically the musical takes place in the first movie, and the ogre is being evicted from his swampland, his home, by all these fairy tale creatures who are being evicted from their homes by the evil Lord Farquaad.
I love the name Farquaad.
Oh, he is a pistol, and he is played in our production by Kevin Bellamy, who will be amazing.
Oh, he's always good.
And so to get his land back, the ogre has to do a challenge set forth to him by Lord Farquaad, which is to rescue the beautiful Princess Fiona from a tower, which is protected by a dragon. And so if he's successful and he rescues the princess, then he will get his land back. And so that's the challenge. And along the way, he meets a donkey who will become his pal for life, whether he wants it or not. And those two will eventually battle the dragon. And so there's a lot of challenging effects, a lot of special challenges as far as costuming, as far as set design. And so we've got a tremendous production staff that are just doing an amazing job.
So it sounds a little bit like Beauty and the Beast in a way, because Shrek and Fiona, I suppose, are Beauty and the Beast.
Well,
a little
bit.
Because Shrek is a big, gloppy
ogre.
Yeah.
But Fiona has secrets
He's
of
green,
her.
Isn't he?
Oh yes, yes. But Fiona has secrets of her own, which
really?
which come out during the show.
But then it also sounds a little like Man of La Mancha with the donkey in tow.
Yes, and the donkey talks. In fact, the donkey really doesn't shut up a whole lot. That's one of the challenging things.
I think more people should be named Farquaad and Fiona. I like those names a lot.
They're wonderful. They're wonderful character names, and they go along beautifully with the show.
Good. Well, it sounds like a really great show to come see.
I think it's for the whole family. First 3 weekends of November, Saturday and Sunday, and it will be in their dinner packages available. It'll be a delightful show.
Okay. Thank you, Tricia.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. We'll be back again next week with another edition of Eye on the Arts. Eye on the Arts is made possible in part by South Shore Arts, the Indiana Arts Commission, and the National Endowment for the Arts, a federal agency.
Just a short drive south of the region, there's a place that some of Indiana's wildest citizens call home. I got to visit the Wolf Park in Battleground, Indiana on this week's Jump in the Lake. I'm here with Dana Drenzek. She's the general manager of the Wolf Park here in Battleground, Indiana. And when people come to the Wolf Park, what kind of things can they expect to see and do?
Well, they get to expect to see obviously wolves, and then our other species that we have here, bison, foxes, coyotes. They can take a tour of our facility that's guided and gets to educate them on more about these species.
You may not have heard of the Wolf Park, but that's not because it hasn't been here for a really long time. You guys have been open, or at least actively supporting wolf communities since 1972.
Yeah, over 40 years.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, let's go take a look at some animals.
Okay, sounds great. Let's go. So we actually are coming up here on the first enclosure here, which is actually our two coyotes, Twister and Willow. They came from a DNR facility out in Utah. And the primary reason in having our coyotes on display here is basically to show the difference between wolves and coyotes. And everybody in Chicago and of course also in Indiana have seen or heard coyotes. And they're like, oh, I saw a wolf in my backyard. Probably not.
A coyote. And they are significantly smaller. That's
they
the
are.
First thing you notice.
Yeah, they're about 25 pounds. Wolves can get up to 100 pounds. And so the size difference is definitely the quickest. Their howls are very, very different as well.
Both the coyotes and the wolves have a different means of communication that's not just restricted to the howl, correct? They make lots of noises, like your family pet might, not that they're mean the same things necessarily, but they have lots of different utterances, correct?
They've got growls, they've got, whines, whimpers, yelping, all of the different things that you would hear from your dog at home.
All right, everybody who comes here and who wants to howl with the wolves gets a lesson. I need a lesson.
Okay. So basically, it's pretty simple. You choose the tone that you want. You make an O with your lips, and you go ooh.
Okay. Ooh.
Ooh,
I got that.
Okay. All right. So you ready?
I'm as ready as I'm gonna be. Yeah.
Okay. We have 75 acres of land. We currently have 10 wolves, 13 bison, 5 foxes, and 2 coyotes. And so starting from just the 2 wolves, it really was the public's interest because we're a nonprofit organization. So all of the things that you see here, the fences, the bleachers, the enclosures, this all comes from, the public admission price, donations, funding.
Is that your howl?
Yeah, I wanted it to be in pitch and, good.
It was awesome.
Whatever.
If you'd like to see any more about our Jump in the Lake segment or any of the other segments in our show, you can go to lakeshorepublicmedia.org. And of course, we always like to hear from our viewers in all kinds of ways, right?
That's right. If you have a story idea that howls or hoots, especially because Halloween's coming up, you can always send us your thoughts, concerns, and questions to tvfeedback@lakeshorepublicmedia.org. We're also on Twitter @Lakeshore Report and Facebook.
So you can find us in all kinds of interesting ways. We want to thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you next week on Lakeshore Report.